The town of Red Willow sat where the railroad gave up and the wilderness took over. It was a place built by hands that cracked and bled, by men who learned early that silence was safer than hope. The Callahan Ranch stood a mile outside town, wide and stubborn as the four brothers who ran it. Their father had carved it out of unforgiving land, and when he died he left behind 4 sons and a legacy that felt heavier than gold. Ethan was the eldest, broad-shouldered and quiet, with eyes that had seen too much responsibility too early. Jonah came next, sharp-witted and restless, always smiling like he was hiding a second life behind his teeth. Luke, the third, carried a preacher's calm and a farmer's patience, believing deeply in things that could not be proven. And Samuel, the youngest, was fire and thunder, quick to laugh, quick to fight, and quicker to feel alone. They worked side by side, dawn to dusk, fixing fences, breaking horses, hauling cattle, and eating their meals in a house that echoed with boots but not with laughter. Women came and went through Red Willow, passing through on trains or marrying men who didn't smell like sweat and dust. The Callahan brothers watched from a distance, pretending they didn't care, until the nights grew too long and too quiet. It was Jonah who found the advertisement folded inside an old newspaper. Mail-order brides, women seeking honest men, stability, and a chance at love in the West. Jonah laughed at first, a sharp bark of disbelief, but he didn't throw the paper away. Ethan read it later, silently, his face unreadable. Luke prayed on it, asking God if this was desperation or destiny. Samuel didn't say a word, but that night he stared at the ceiling, imagining a future that didn't end alone, without telling one another. Each brother wrote a letter. Each letter was different, shaped by the man who wrote it. Ethan's was steady and respectful, promising protection and loyalty. Jonah's was charming and clever, filled with humor and big dreams. Luke spoke of faith, kindness, and building something meaningful. Samuel's was raw and honest, admitting his flaws and his hunger for something real. Weeks passed, then months. And then one morning 4 letters arrived. They all said yes. The women would arrive on the same train. The day the train came in, Red Willow felt different, like the town itself was holding its breath. The brothers stood on the platform, cleaned up and nervous, boots polished, hats adjusted too many times. They didn't talk much. Words felt dangerous. The train hissed and groaned as it slowed, iron screaming against iron. Doors opened, people spilled out, and then they saw them. 4 women stepped onto the platform together. They looked alike in a way that made the world tilt. Same dark hair, same strong cheekbones, same eyes, each a slightly different shade of storm. They moved with a shared rhythm, close but not clinging, as if they had learned long ago how to survive by standing side by side. Ethan's breath caught. Jonah forgot to smile. Luke crossed himself. Samuel felt his heart slam against his ribs. They were sisters. The eldest stepped forward first. Her posture was straight, her gaze steady. "My name is Margaret," she said. "These are my sisters, Eleanor, Ruth, and Clara." Margaret explained it calmly, without apology. They had grown up with nothing but one another. Orphaned young, passed between relatives who never wanted 4 hungry girls. They made a pact years ago they would never be separated again. When they saw 4 advertisements from the same ranch, they took it as a sign, or a gamble worth taking. "If that's a problem," Margaret said evenly, "we understand." The brothers exchanged glances heavy with uncertainty. 4 women, 4 sisters, one ranch already strained by pride and silence. Ethan was the first to speak. "You're welcome here," he said, "all of you." That decision would change everything. Life on the ranch became crowded in ways none of them expected. The sisters worked as hard as the men, cooking, mending, helping with the animals, refusing to be treated like fragile ornaments. They argued, laughed, and filled the house with noise that felt like life rushing back into dead rooms. But love is never simple, especially when blood ties bind hearts together. Margaret gravitated toward Ethan, drawn to his quiet strength and the way he listened more than he spoke. Eleanor matched Jonah W. Word for word, smile for smile, their banter hiding deeper wounds. Ruth found peace with Luke, their shared belief in patience and purpose forming a gentle bond. Clara, the youngest sister, saw through Samuel's bravado, recognizing the loneliness he tried so hard to mask, yet jealousy crept in like a slow poison. Protectiveness turned sharp. Old habits clashed with new hopes. The town whispered, 4 brothers, 4 sisters, too neat, too strange. One night a fight broke out between Jonah and Samuel over nothing and everything. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Clara cried. Ruth prayed. Eleanor slammed a door so hard it rattled the walls. Margaret stood in the middle of it all, realizing that love would not be enough unless they all chose it every single day. The first chapter of their story ended not with certainty, but with a fragile understanding. Love had arrived, but it would demand more than any of them had ever given before. Winter came early that year, fierce and unforgiving, testing every promise that had been made under warmer skies. Snow buried the fences. Wind howled through the valley like an accusation. And inside the Callahan house, the bonds between brothers and sisters were stretched to their breaking point. Margaret learned quickly that loving Ethan meant accepting his silence, the way he carried the weight of everyone's survival on his shoulders. She challenged him, gently but firmly, teaching him that leadership did not mean suffering alone. The night he finally admitted he was afraid of failing them all, she held his face and told him fear was not weakness, it was proof he cared. Eleanor pushed Jonah harder than anyone ever had. She saw through his charm to the boy who had learned to joke so he wouldn't have to feel. When she confronted him about his lies, small ones, stupid ones, he nearly walked away. Instead, he stayed. And staying was the bravest thing he had ever done. Ruth and Luke faced their own quiet storm. Faith was easy when life was simple. It was harder when crops failed and tempers flared. When Ruth lost her belief for a time, Luke didn't preach. He listened. And in that silence, something stronger than certainty grew between them. Samuel and Clara burned hot and fast, 2 storms colliding. They fought loudly and loved fiercely, terrifying everyone around them. When Samuel nearly lost his life in a ranch accident, Clara sat by his bed for 3 days, refusing to leave. When he woke, broken and ashamed, she told him she wasn't afraid of his fire. She was afraid of him running from it. The town of Red Willow tested them too. Rumors turned ugly. A drunken man insulted the sisters one night, questioning their virtue. Ethan broke his nose. Jonah stood beside him. Luke prayed for forgiveness later. Samuel dared anyone else to try. What saved them wasn't perfection, it was choice. One by one, the brothers asked the sisters to marry them, not because a letter had promised it, but because life had proven it. The weddings were simple, held under a wide sky that had seen too many lonely years. 4 couples stood together, hands linked, not just to their chosen partner, but to the family they had built together. The final test came when spring floods threatened the ranch. Water tore through the valley, ripping up months of work. The brothers fought the river with everything they had. The sisters worked beside them, refusing safety, refusing to be left behind. When the waters finally receded, the ranch still stood, scarred but alive. In the quiet that followed, as green pushed through mud, and the world remembered how to begin again, the Callahan Ranch felt different. It was no longer just a place of labor. It was a home. 4 brothers who had ordered brides out of loneliness found something far deeper than they had dared hope for. 4 sisters who had sworn never to be separated found not just husbands, but a future where love was chosen daily, fiercely, and together. And in Red Willow, when the wind came down from the mountains, it carried laughter now, proof that even in the hardest places, love could arrive, stay, and change everything.